The artifact had been discovered by accident. Deep within an excavation site in the Arctic, a team of researchers stumbled upon a strange metallic object that seemed to pulse with energy. Initially, they thought it was some kind of military technology left behind by an ancient civilization, but the more they studied it, the less they could explain. Unlike anything on Earth, it seemed to resonate with a frequency that defied known science. Dr. Eleanor Hayes, the lead scientist on the project, had felt an odd chill the first time she touched the artifact. The object seemed to come alive under her fingers, vibrating ever so slightly. Her team, comprised of the brightest minds from across the planet, had no idea that this discovery would change everything. The artifact had the power to unlock technologies that no human civilization had ever seen before. Faster than light travel, advanced weapons, and systems of energy generation that were thought to be pure fantasy. At first, the discovery was classified, shared only within the highest echelons of Earth's military and scientific communities. The world had always viewed humanity as insignificant in the grand scheme of the universe, just a young, relatively unimportant species caught in the shadow of ancient and powerful empires. But the potential of this alien artifact was too great to be hidden forever. Soon whispers of the artifact began circulating. Private corporations began pouring resources into the project, and governments around the world scrambled to get their hands on its secrets. As the technology began to unfold, it became clear that Earth was no longer as helpless as it once seemed. The first breakthrough came when a young engineer named Liam Calder managed to reverse engineer a small piece of the artifact's energy system. He powered an entire city block with a device that had been based on ancient alien tech, something humans had thought impossible. But the implications were far greater than just solving Earth's energy crisis. This was technology that could change the balance of power in the galaxy. Humanity was not just on the cusp of a new era. They had just unlocked the door to the stars. Meanwhile, across the galaxy, the ancient empires of the Vrel, the Zypharians, and the Eldari watched with growing concern. They had long seen Earth as a backwater planet, its inhabitants weak and divided. They had maintained their dominance for centuries by carefully controlling the flow of technology and knowledge to lesser species. The idea that humans might suddenly be in possession of a weapon that could challenge them was unthinkable. But they hadn't yet realized the full scope of what Earth had found. In secret meetings held on distant planets, the leaders of these empires began to discuss the human discovery. What if they are not as weak as we thought? One of the Zypharian commanders asked, voice low and tense. What if they are a threat to everything we've built? A voice from the Vrel spoke, its tone heavy with disdain. They're still just children playing with fire. Let them think they found something powerful. The moment they expose themselves, we strike. And so, the galaxy held its breath. The discovery on Earth would set events into motion that no one could predict. For humanity, the path ahead was uncertain, but one thing was clear. They were no longer a species to be ignored. The galaxy had just woken up to the undeniable fact that when humanity says no, everything changes. Back on Earth, as the scientific community continued to unlock the artifact's secrets, Dr. Hayes stood before her team, the weight of their work pressing on her shoulders. She looked at the faces of her colleagues, fear, excitement, and uncertainty in their eyes. They had no idea that their discovery would soon draw the attention of forces far beyond their understanding. Forces that had shaped the galaxy for millennia. And now, perhaps they were about to face a species who would not back down. The spark had been lit, and there was no turning back. The Vrel Empire, ruthless and unyielding, had been watching humanity's rapid progress with a growing sense of alarm. The galaxy had long been under their rule, and they had maintained control through fear, manipulation, and brute strength. They prided themselves on being the dominant force in the universe, crushing any species that dared to challenge their authority. But when the reports came in about the human discovery, their confidence began to crack. The artifact had piqued their interest, but what truly terrified them was the potential it held. What if this primitive species could use it to challenge their power? What if Earth, a mere backwater world, could become a threat? The Vrel knew that they couldn't risk letting humanity grow too strong. It wasn't long before the Vrel made their move. In the dead of night, without warning, a fleet of massive warships appeared in orbit around Earth. They were silent at first, their massive hulls looming like dark shadows against the vast expanse of space. Their guns, powerful enough to obliterate entire cities, were locked and aimed. On Earth, military officials scrambled to understand what was happening, but before they could react, the Vrel unleashed their first strike. Cities on the surface were devastated. The Vrel's energy weapons tore through buildings and infrastructure with terrifying precision. There was no declaration of war, no warning, just pure, unrelenting destruction. It was a brutal show of force, meant to remind humanity of its place in the galaxy. The message was clear. Earth was nothing more than an insect, and the Vrel would crush them without a second thought. Dr. Eleanor Hayes, who had been leading the scientific team working with the artifact, watched in horror as the news flooded in. Earth was under attack. The skies above her city were filled with flashes of light as the Vrel's weapons ripped through the atmosphere. The same alien technology they had only recently begun to understand was now being used against them, and humanity had no defense. At least, not yet. As panic spread across the planet, humanity's leaders made a fateful decision. They knew they couldn't just surrender, not after everything they had worked for. They had no choice but to fight. Dr. Hayes and her team, now thrust into the heart of the conflict, rushed to bring the artifact's potential to life. They began to reverse engineer more of its technology, hoping it would provide the means to defend their world. In an underground lab, Liam Calder, the young engineer who had unlocked the first piece of the artifact's energy system, worked tirelessly alongside the military's finest engineers. Together, they constructed a makeshift defense system using the alien technology. It wasn't much, but it was something. Humanity's first weapon capable of taking on the Vrel was born out of desperation. As the Vrel ships continued their orbital bombardment, humanity launched their first counterattack. The weapon, powered by the artifact's energy source, was unlike anything the Vrel had ever seen. It fired beams of concentrated energy that hit with pinpoint accuracy, knocking out the Vrel's shields and causing significant damage to their ships. The humans had managed to turn the tide, if only for a brief moment. The Vrel, stunned by the unexpected resistance, quickly regrouped. Their leaders were furious. How could this primitive species fight back with such force? It was unthinkable. The battle was far from over, but for the first time in galactic history, a species deemed insignificant by the powers of the galaxy had forced a dominant empire to pause. Despite their initial shock, the Vrel were not easily defeated. They would return with a vengeance. But for now, humanity had proven something that had never been in doubt for them. They were not going to bow down, and they would not go quietly into the night. As the dust settled and the first wave of attacks subsided, Earth's defenders regrouped, understanding the full magnitude of the challenge ahead. This wasn't just a fight for survival. It was the beginning of humanity's rise. If they were to win, they would need to unite, adapt, and use everything they had learned from the artifact to turn the tables on the most powerful empire in the galaxy. The galaxy had just witnessed humanity's first strike back, and it would never be the same again. The Vrel had underestimated them once. They would not make the same mistake twice. In the wake of the Vrel's devastating attack on Earth, humanity stood at a crossroads. The planet had suffered, but it hadn't broken. For the first time in history, humans had fought back and given as good as they had received. The Vrel were formidable, but humanity's newfound strength, born from the mysterious artifact, had proven that Earth was no longer a passive target in the galaxy. But even in the aftermath of their victory, humanity knew that surviving a single battle wasn't enough. The Vrel would regroup, and they would return. Earth could not face this threat alone. Dr. Eleanor Hayes and her colleagues knew that the artifact's true power was still only partially understood. It was a gift from the stars, yes, but it was also a key that could unlock even greater potential. If humanity could harness this power fully, they might have a fighting chance to hold off the Vrel and anyone else who dared challenge them. So the decision was made. The world's leaders, realizing that Earth's survival depended on unity, called for an unprecedented alliance. They reached out not just to Earth's allies, but to every oppressed species across the galaxy. There were planets and civilizations long under the heel of the Vrel, the Zypharians, and other ancient powers, species that had been silenced by the crushing weight of empire. Now they had a chance to rise. Humanity sent out broadcasts of hope, calling upon those who had suffered under the Galactic Order. You are not alone. Join us, and we will fight together. The time of silence is over. Stand with us, and we will reclaim our freedom. The response was overwhelming. Many had long dreamed of rebellion, but fear had kept them in check. Now, seeing humanity's defiance, they found courage in the idea of standing together. One by one, communications came through, planets, species, and fleets, declaring their intent to join the fight. The galaxy's oppressed began to rally, and for the first time in millennia, the balance of power seemed to shift. On Earth, the leaders of the new alliance gathered. Among them were the brightest minds of the planet, military commanders, and diplomats who had long been working in secret to prepare for this day. The alliance's first objective was clear: train the newly united species in the ways of war, using humanity's rapidly advancing technology as the foundation. They had seen how powerful the Vrel's fleet was, but they had also learned how vulnerable it could be when faced with ingenuity and resilience. Liam Calder, the young engineer who had helped develop the first human weapon capable of damaging the Vrel, was now tasked with overseeing the creation of new, more advanced technology. Using the secrets from the artifact, humanity's engineers began crafting ships and weapons that could challenge the power of the Vrel. Faster-than-light travel, once thought impossible for humanity, was now a reality. They built fleet after fleet, designed not just for defense, but for offense as well. But technology alone would not win this war. The galaxy had known long periods of peace, where no one species could dominate. Humanity's greatest strength was its spirit. A single human mind, driven by purpose and belief, could accomplish what entire empires could not. The message humanity sent out was not one of mere survival, it was one of liberation. They were not fighting to defend their planet alone. They were fighting for the freedom of every species that had been subjugated. As the first ships of the newly formed alliance took flight, they didn't just carry the hopes of their individual worlds. They carried the promise of a galaxy where no species would be crushed under the boot of a tyrant. The Vrel, the Zypharians, the Eldari, all of them had made the mistake of thinking humanity was weak. But now, with the combined strength of those who had long suffered, humanity had the power to not just resist, but to bring change. The galaxy was on the brink of an upheaval. The Vrel had no idea what was coming, and neither did the galaxy. But one thing was certain: humanity had ignited the spark of rebellion, and the fire was spreading. As the Alliance prepared to take its first offensive steps, Dr. Hayes stood before the gathered leaders, feeling the weight of the future on her shoulders. "We're not just fighting for Earth," she said, her voice steady but filled with resolve. "We're fighting for every world that has ever been oppressed. When we say no, we mean it, and we will make the galaxy hear us." And as the first ships of the United Coalition launched into space, the galaxy trembled. The fight for freedom had only just begun. The victory celebrations were short-lived. As the newly formed alliance between humanity and the galaxy's oppressed species began to take shape, the leaders of the ancient Galactic Council, those who had maintained power for millennia, watched with growing unease. The Council had long seen the galaxy as their domain, a fragile piece held in place by their vast military forces and political maneuvering. The Vrel Empire had been their enforcers, ensuring that no species ever rose up. Now, however, humanity's defiance was a direct threat to everything they had built. They had underestimated Earth once, and they would not make that mistake again. The Council called for an emergency summit to address the growing rebellion, and their decision was swift and unforgiving. Humanity's continued resistance could not be tolerated. The galaxy's leaders agreed on one course of action. Earth and its newfound allies had to be brought to heel, or the galaxy would descend into chaos. The Council sent an ultimatum across all communication channels, a message meant to silence the rebellion before it could gain any more momentum. "We, the Council of Galactic Powers, demand that you cease your insurrection and submit to the established galactic order. Surrender your weaponry, disband your forces, and accept the laws that have governed this galaxy for millennia. Refuse, and the full might of the galaxy will descend upon your world. Your species will be eradicated." The transmission was broadcast across every planet, every system, every colony in the galaxy. The message was clear. Humanity and their allies were nothing more than rebels, a nuisance to be wiped away. There would be no room for negotiation, no path to peace. The Council's resolve was unshakable, but humanity was not intimidated. Dr. Eleanor Hayes and the other leaders of the Alliance gathered in a secret war room, analyzing the Council's demand. They knew the Vrel, Zephyrians, and the other empires would not hesitate to carry out their threat. They had seen their merciless tactics firsthand. But they also knew that surrendering would mean the destruction of everything they had fought for. To give in was to accept the status quo of tyranny that had dominated the galaxy for eons. Do we really believe we can defeat them? Liam Calder, now an advisor to the military, asked. His voice was filled with doubt, not from fear, but from the sheer weight of the challenge ahead. Humanity had made incredible strides, but the Council's combined forces dwarfed their own. Dr. Hayes met his gaze. "We have something they don't, something they will never understand. The will to fight for freedom, for every species that has been oppressed. We are not alone in this. We've already seen that." Across the galaxy, other species that had once been enslaved or dominated by the Council began to mobilize. The Zephyrians, who had been left in the shadows for centuries, now pledged their full support. The Eldorai, masters of psionics, began preparing to lend their psychic abilities to the cause. The many species that had once been fragmented in fear now united under a single banner. The galaxy, for the first time, was waking up to the power of unity. Back on Earth, a new broadcast was sent to the galaxy. This one was not a plea for peace. It was a declaration. The voice of humanity, amplified by their allies, echoed across the stars. To the Council, and to any who stand with them, hear this. We will not bow. We will not surrender. We will fight until the last of us stands. The galaxy does not belong to you, and it never will. We will be free, or we will die trying. The message resonated with millions. It wasn't just a rallying cry, it was a statement of purpose. Earth had drawn a line in the sand, and every species that had suffered under the Council's rule felt the echo. The galaxy trembled, not with the threat of annihilation, but with the certainty that a new age was beginning. The Council had underestimated humanity, and now they would learn the consequences. The full force of the Council's military might was about to come down upon Earth, but humanity had prepared. The Vrel would not be the only empire marching into battle. The galaxy's oppressed were ready to rise, and the Alliance, forged in the fires of defiance, would be humanity's greatest weapon. The galaxy had once trembled at the thought of rebellion, but now it would tremble at the thought of humanity's defiance. The galaxy had never seen anything like it. The Council's response to humanity's defiance was swift and brutal. Thousands of ships, war-hardened and deadly, descended upon Earth and its newly allied forces. The skies above the planet were filled with the might of the Council's fleets, prepared to crush the rebellion once and for all. The Vrel Empire, eager to prove their dominance after their humiliating retreat, led the charge with their powerful dreadnoughts and fleets of warships. On Earth, the mood was one of resolve. Despite the overwhelming odds, humanity had one thing the Council had failed to account for: a relentless drive to survive and protect their newfound freedom. As the first wave of the Council's ships entered Earth's orbit, humanity was ready. The weapons forged from the secrets of the alien artifact hummed to life, and humanity's ships, sleek, fast, and powered by technology far beyond anything the Council had anticipated, prepared to meet the coming storm. In the heart of Earth's capital, Dr. Eleanor Hayes and her team stood in a command center that had been hastily converted into a war room. The world was about to change, and they were at the center of it. The artifact's energy systems had been further refined, powering new weapons capable of piercing even the Council's most formidable defenses. The Alliance had spent weeks coordinating their attack, drawing on the strengths of each species involved. The Zypharians' deadly strike forces, the Eldoray's psionic abilities, and humanity's technological ingenuity had all come together to form an army that was unlike any the galaxy had ever seen. "All systems are ready," Lion Calder reported, his voice filled with a mix of excitement and tension. "We've got the element of surprise. The Vrel are expecting a full planetary defense, but they're not prepared for what we've got in the air." Humanity's forces, having gained a significant head start in the arms race thanks to the artifact, launched their counteroffensive. Earth's cities, though scarred by the earlier Vrel assault, became rallying points for the Alliance's military efforts. The first battle took place in Earth's atmosphere, where the Council ships tried to break through the planet's defensive perimeter. The Vrel were confident their superior firepower would make short work of the human ships, but they quickly found that their own tactics were ineffective. The human ships, smaller and faster, darted around the Vrel warships with unmatched agility, using hit-and-run tactics that caused massive damage to the larger vessels. Each time the Vrel tried to bring their heavier guns to bear, the human ships outmaneuvered them, striking at weak points and retreating before the enemy could retaliate. But the battle wasn't just in space, it was also a war of minds. The Eldorai, with their powerful psionics, worked alongside the human military to disrupt the Council's command and control systems. Psychic blasts overloaded enemy ships' communication arrays, sending confusion and chaos rippling through the enemy's ranks. Meanwhile, the Zypharians unleashed guerrilla tactics, using stealth ships to disable enemy warships from within their own fleets, sowing further discord among the Council's forces. The combined strength of the Alliance was becoming apparent, and the Council's superiority was beginning to wane. The battle was no longer a one-sided affair. The Alliance's forces were starting to gain the upper hand. Each victory, however small, built upon the last, feeding the growing sense of possibility. The Council, accustomed to crushing all resistance, now found themselves fighting a war of attrition, one they were not prepared for. Dr. Hayes, watching the battle unfold through holographic projections, couldn't help but feel a sense of awe. The humans, once insignificant in the eyes of the galaxy, were now striking at the heart of the most powerful empire in existence. Every strike, every victory was a testament to their will to fight for their freedom, and for the freedom of every oppressed species that had joined their cause. In the void of space, the Vral dreadnoughts were beginning to falter. One by one, their ships were disabled by the Alliance's relentless attacks. The Vral, for now, however, humanity and its allies had pushed the Council back. But the battle for the future of the galaxy was far from over. The Council would regroup, and new threats would arise. Humanity had made its stand, and the galaxy would never forget it. The question remained, would the galaxy accept this new order, or would it fight to maintain the old ways? The future was uncertain, but one thing was clear. Humanity had proven that when it said no, the galaxy would indeed tremble. The initial shock of the Zypharian betrayal still lingered in the air like a heavy fog. The moment their ships turned against the humans and their allies, the galaxy seemed to hold its breath. For a moment, the rebellion appeared on the brink of collapse. But the truth was, humanity had endured far worse before. "We'll do this," Dr. Hayes said, her voice filled with quiet determination. "We've come too far to let this setback stop us. The Zypharians may have turned, but that just means the fight is ours to win." The battle lines were drawn. The rebellion's next move would be their most critical yet. And for the first time, Dr. Hayes could feel the weight of the galaxy's future pressing down on her. But despite the uncertainty, there was one undeniable truth. Humanity had fought for its survival before, and they would do so again. The war was far from over, but the seeds of victory had already been planted. Now it was time to see if they could grow into something that could change the galaxy forever. The Zypharian betrayal had cast a dark shadow over the rebellion, but humanity and its remaining allies were not about to back down. Commander Aria Lawson and Dr. Eleanor Hayes knew that the stakes had grown even higher. The betrayal was not only a blow to their military strategy, but to the fragile trust they had built with other species across the galaxy. Yet, amidst the chaos, there was a glimmer of hope. The galaxy's oppressed did not falter in the face of adversity. They had once been silenced, but now they had the strength to rise, together. The Vral, capitalizing on the confusion, launched a new wave of attacks, but their fleet was not as unified as before. The Zypharians' sudden shift had caught them off guard, and their empire, though powerful, had begun to crack. It was clear that the battle was far from over, but the momentum had shifted in humanity's favor. The question was no longer whether humanity could stand alone. It was whether they could trust the galaxy's fractured alliances to hold strong long enough to win. Across the galaxy, whispers of rebellion were growing louder. The Vral and their allies were not the only power in the galaxy. Earth's message had spread far beyond their borders, sparking movements and systems that had been under the Vral's control for centuries. Planets that had remained silent for so long were now seeking to join the fight, eager to shake off their chains. The Eldorai, fierce in their psionic abilities, were the first to reassert their commitment to the cause. They had been watching the betrayal unfold from the shadows, waiting for the right moment to act. When they saw the Vral's faltering resolve, they decided that the time had come to show their true loyalty. The Eldorai fleets, drawn from their mysterious worlds deep within the galaxy, arrived at Earth's defense with renewed vigor. Their psionic prowess disrupted the Vral's communication systems, causing chaos among their ranks. It was a strategic victory, one that gave humanity a much-needed edge. But the greatest surprise came from the Canary, a race of nomadic warriors who had been on the fringes of the conflict. Known for their honor and skill in battle, they had been hesitant to join the alliance, unsure if they could trust the humans. However, when they saw the Zypharian betrayal and the determination in humanity's eyes, they made a bold decision. The Canary ships, sleek and deadly, entered the fray, adding their strength to the rebellion. Their warriors were fierce, their loyalty unwavering, and their presence tipped the balance even further in favor of the alliance. It became clear to the Council that they had underestimated the power of the galaxy's underdog species. Humanity's resistance had ignited a spark that had grown into a raging fire. The galaxy was no longer divided into the ruling elite and the oppressed masses. The Vrel's control was slipping, and the alliance of free species was tightening. Back on Earth, Dr. Hayes and Ariel Lawson strategized their next move. The betrayal of the Zypharians still stung, but they had no time to dwell on it. The war was far from over, and the galaxy was watching. "We need to act fast," Aria said, her gaze focused on the holographic map of the galaxy. "The longer we wait, the more the Vrel regroup and re-establish their command. We can't let this opportunity slip away." Dr. Hayes nodded, her mind racing. "We've brought together a united front of species that have been oppressed for generations. They will not stop fighting, and neither will we. We strike now, while the Vrel are still reeling." The plan was set into motion. With the renewed strength of the Canary, the Eldorei, and the remaining allies, the rebellion launched a massive offensive against the Vrel. Their target was the Vrel capital, a heavily fortified world that had long been the symbol of their power. If they could strike at the heart of the Vrel Empire, it would send a message to the rest of the galaxy. Freedom was within reach. The battle for the Vrel capital would be the defining moment in the conflict. The rebellion's forces were diverse, each with their unique strengths, but they were united by one common purpose: to bring an end to the Vrel's tyranny and to secure a future where all species could live without fear. As the fleets of the Alliance gathered for the final assault, Dr. Hayes stood before the War Room's holographic display, staring at the distant world that would be the site of humanity's greatest challenge. She could feel the weight of history on her shoulders. This wasn't just about Earth anymore. This was about the future of the galaxy. "We fight for freedom," Dr. Hayes whispered, more to herself than anyone else. "We fight for the chance to decide our own fate, and we will not stop until we've won." The ships of the Alliance prepared to launch, and the galaxy held its breath. The war was coming to a head. Victory or defeat, it would all come down to this final battle. The final battle was upon them. The fleets of humanity, the Canary, the Eldorei, and the other species that had risen in rebellion against the Vrel Empire gathered in orbit around the Vrel capital. The heart of the empire, a world known for its brutal suppression and untold riches, was now the battleground for the future of the galaxy. The Vrel, despite their earlier losses, had regrouped and fortified their stronghold. Their fleet, reinforced by every remaining warship they could muster, surrounded the capital in an impenetrable defensive grid. They were determined to crush the rebellion and restore their dominion over the galaxy. To them, humanity's defiance had become an insufferable threat. They could not afford to let Earth and its allies continue to grow stronger. This would be their final stand. But the Alliance's resolve was unyielding. The betrayal of the Zypharians was now a distant memory. Their focus was on one singular goal: victory. The odds were still daunting. The Vrel had overwhelming numbers, and their technology was far beyond what the Alliance could field. Yet humanity had something that the Vrel had overlooked: the unbreakable will to fight for freedom, and the ability to adapt and innovate in the heat of battle. Dr. Eleanor Hayes stood in the command center aboard the Defiant, her mind focused on the task at hand. She could hear the hum of the engines as the fleet readied itself for the assault. Her thoughts drifted to the long road that had led them here, the countless battles, the sacrifices, the moments of doubt. And yet, the one thing that had kept them going was the belief that this fight was worth it. "We've come a long way," Aria Lawson said, her voice steady, yet filled with the weight of the moment. "But we're not done yet. We're going to end this today for all the species that have suffered." Dr. Hayes nodded. "We fight for them, and for every future that's worth living." With the fleet in position, the attack began. The Alliance's ships surged forward, a unified front of human, Alderai, Canary, and others, their weapons primed and ready. The Vral fleet responded immediately, opening fire with their massive energy cannons, sending waves of destructive blasts toward the approaching rebels. The battle was brutal, with the skies above the capital lit up by the blinding flashes of energy weapons and explosions. Human ships darted in and out of the Vral lines, using their superior maneuverability to evade the Vral's deadly fire. The ill-derived psionics disrupted enemy communications, sending psychic waves of confusion through the Vral fleets. Meanwhile, the Canary warriors, with their renowned skills in tactical warfare, struck at the Vral command ships, using hit-and-run tactics to dismantle their defenses from within. But the true power of the Alliance lay in its unity. Each species, despite their differences, fought side by side, each contributing their unique strengths to the battle. Humanity's ships were relentless, striking at the Vral's weak points and using their advanced technology to disable key parts of the enemy's fleet. The Canary's fleet remained ever watchful, guarding the human ships and providing a buffer against enemy fire. The Eldarai focused their efforts on the Vral's command ships, causing widespread chaos as their psionic abilities scrambled vital systems. As the battle raged on, Dr. Hayes and Aria knew that the next step would be critical. The Vral's defensive grid had held strong, but they were weakening. The central core of the Vral fleet, a colossal warship known as the Vral Dominion, remained their last line of defense. It was heavily protected, bristling with weapons and shields, but it was not invincible. Humanity's engineers, with the help of their allies, had developed a weapon capable of piercing the Vral Dominion's defenses. It was risky, and there was no guarantee it would work. But if they had any hope of ending this war, they had to take the chance. The weapon, a specialized energy beam powered by the secrets of the alien artifact, was their last best hope. It was a gamble. One shot, one chance. If they failed, the Vral would annihilate the rebellion once and for all. But if they succeeded, it would be the end of the Vral's reign. "This is it," Aria said, her voice filled with determination. "Let's end this." Dr. Hayes nodded, giving the order. The weapon, charged to its maximum capacity, fired a brilliant beam of concentrated energy, cutting through the heart of the Vral Dominion. The massive ship staggered, its shields collapsing under the strain, and for a moment, the galaxy seemed to hold its breath. Then the Vral Dominion exploded, sending shockwaves across the battlefield. The Vral fleet, leaderless and crippled, began to fall apart. Their once dominant forces scattered, retreating in disarray. The rebellion had won. As the remnants of the Vral fleet fled, the Alliance's forces stood victorious. The battle for the future of the galaxy had been won, not by sheer force of numbers, but by the strength of unity, resilience, and the undying spirit of freedom. Dr. Hayes looked out at the stars, knowing that this was just the beginning. The galaxy would rebuild. The reign of the Vral was over, but new challenges awaited. Yet for the first time in centuries, The galaxy felt like a place where all species could finally shape their own destiny. And humanity had proven, beyond a shadow of a doubt, that when it said no, the galaxy trembled.